So first things first, when it basically became apparent that we would be canceling school in 2016, not 2016, 2020, spring 2020, I basically ran to Micro Center and picked me up one of these, which is a Wacom tablet. Um, it was like the sixth person to pick one up that day because a lot of schools were starting to go completely virtual. This is useful for if you don't have a touchscreen. This is useful. This is a super small version, and it's designed. It was mainly targeted towards artists and stuff. I am the um whatever we are do. I don't think we'll be virtual after Thanksgiving. I haven't heard anything about that. But anyway, this is a small one, but it's still perfectly fine for just doing drawing. Just uses a pen like this, which I'll be using today to demonstrate. Second, a good microphone does wonders. Now my audio setup is not what you would consider a typical kind of audio setup because I'm not using a USB mic. I'm using an XLR base mic, which is this socket over here. Your typical microphone mic. But if you've got a setup like this, where you're plugging it into a microphone preamp and stuff, which is then via USB. This mic over here, the SM57, built like a tank. Like literally audio engineer, it's been built the same way for like over 50 years. Literally audio engineers will say it probably doesn't work right unless you actually chuck it at a wall first. So the SM57 and its more well-known SM58, which is if you ask a 4-year-old to draw a microphone, that's what they're going to draw. Those are pretty good. Finally, if you haven't noticed in class, I'm a big fan of vertical mice. This is the vertical mouse I use at home. And I find that's good to use. It's good for hands and stuff, especially if you're going to be typing away at a computer all day. That is possibly the most important thing, which is that you are in a computer science. If you're doing programming, you want to look at and invest in some technologies that help with the ergonomics. That you might find that to be extremely helpful in the long run, because there are difficulties. There's a couple of barriers if you lose the use of your hands. It's not impossible to program. People have figured out how to create their own meta languages for text-to-speech programs to use, but rather not have to reinvent the wheel there. Okay, so let's go ahead and select our course modules. So again, we've got index. So we've got index tree. That's going to be due. Okay. On the 25th. And that's a good decent amount from now. I know recursion's due today, but I'm going to talk about the index tree assignment for a bit. And if you haven't started looking at trees, it's worthwhile to do so. So the first thing is that you're going to need to use file reading to accomplish this. Now, if you don't know how to read files in Java, don't worry. I included a reading from file example, which shows you how to read files in it's a very short program that shows you kind of how to use file reading in Java. And you'll notice that I just do that by using scanner. And then I remind you that you can use split. Also, the replace all, for those of you who took the extra credit, that takes in a regular expression. And for those of you who want to look up regular expressions, that would be a great time. Yes, Prince?
Why do we have to have a try-catch statement when we reading from a file?
It is mandatory because it is a mandatory feature in Java to when you try to read a file, it could throw a file not found exception. So it wants you to have something to handle not being able to find the file. That's just a mandatory feature in Java. There are certain exceptions that are checked versus unchecked exceptions. So there's some exceptions you don't have to prepare a try catch for, such as index out of bounds. But there's some stuff where you do need to. File not found exception. I don't know enough about Java to say why one is needed over the other. I think it's rather silly because both will crash your program just as equally, and both can be caught just as equally. But that's why. The big thing is that if you are working in a the big thing for a reading from file example is where you have to put that file. So be sure to test to make sure that reading from file example works before you start working on the index tree or index node. So where does this have to be put? Well, your code goes in the SRC folder, right? If you're using IntelliJ, right? This does not go in the SRC folder. It just goes in the top level of your project directory, the PG100. Yep, so I said put this on the top level of your project, not your SRC folder. So don't put this in with your code. Put this like on the same level where that folder is. Does that make sense to everybody? Or would... Let me go ahead and boot up IntelliJ rather than just saying stuff so that you can actually see it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and download, and then I will switch views. Okay. Desktop. Save to desktop. Now, PG100 is from Project Gutenberg. It is as I mentioned yesterday, it is a 5 megabyte file, which is pretty big. It is the complete works of William Shakespeare. I'm a big fan of it because it is a large file and it is actually it's not anything like too wacky. All right, so what I'm going to do over here, delete this file. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share screen, and I'm going to share here so everybody can see this. So I'm going to drag my file, my reading from file example right here into SRC. Right, everybody saw that happen. Just magically appeared. And where am I putting my PG100? I'm putting it right here on testing. I've dragged it right onto here. Makes sense to everybody? And so you see PG100 is right here, SRC is right here, and so I can do read from file example. And now I'll go ahead and run it. And you'll notice I get a kind of weird warning at the top over here. The file size exceeds the configured limit, which is basically the limit of files that it wants to analyze. So it's not going to try to analyze this file, which gives you a hint. Like, look at my console, right? It says I printed out everything, but notice that I scroll up and it starts at Will's not so graceless to be ingrate. Will not be so... Will not so graceless as saying. So it started at, my printout started at line 100,161. That's okay. The reason being is that this console is pre-configured to only hold so many lines, or so much memory. And after that amount, it's just got to throw it out because it doesn't want to eat up your RAM, a gigabyte of RAM by keeping out all that printing. Now you can modify your configurations in your IDE or your terminal to keep more of a printing history, but you don't necessarily need to. I'm just kind of trying to show you that is not a bug, it's a feature. Right? So if it looks like you're not printing out everything, that's okay. Also, depending on your computer and what you're using, this printing out process can take a long, long time. It goes pretty fast on my computer because I've got a pretty fast computer. Humble brag. No, that wasn't humble brag at all. That was just a brag. Okay, so don't be surprised. So if it does take a while, especially on a laptop, that's normal. You know, you don't think 5 megabytes is a lot, but it really is in terms of analyzing stuff. Okay, so there you go. That's how you read a file in Java. Now, let me just go into a bit of the technical detail. Basically, file reading relies off of these two things over here, which is scanner.hasNextLine and nextLine. In other words, we open up a scanner, and rather than doing system.in, I say new file name, the file I want to read. Okay, so file creates a file object, and I give it the file name, and the file name is like where I'm gonna find it. And since I just put in the name, I assume I'm gonna find it in the top level directory of my project. Okay, and then what I'm doing, rather than waiting for user input, is that I'm just asking, hey, is there something to scan? Yes, there is, so I'm gonna scan it. And so then you just do scanner next line like you would for taking in user input. Only difference is that you're not reading from user input, you're scanning from a file. Does that make sense to everybody? There are other ways to do file reading in Java. I like Scanner because you already know Scanner. And all you need to know is the hasNextLine. That's the only bit of extra information you might need. There is one more method, which is hasNext, but that just simply gives you the next character. So I like to read one line at a time, because then once I have a line, I can do this. Now notice that we do have some preceding space over here sometimes. If you want, if you're so inclined, you can also, remember, you can do line dot strip. Also remember, strings are immutable. What does that mean? What does it mean for strings to be immutable?
You can't change them.
Yes, that's right. Strings don't get changed ever. Whenever we do an operation that looks like it's changing a string, like converting it to uppercase characters, or converting it to lowercase characters, or stripping out all the white space from that precedes it or ends it, it's not actually doing that. What we're doing is that we create a new string that has that stuff done. Make sense to everybody? Okay, just a reminder there. It's an important thing. Now, with regards to the other parts of it, what we are doing is that what we're doing is we're creating a tree of every word that occurs in the file. So we're storing every word that occurs in the file in a node, and that node holds two things: the word and where it's occurred. So each word gets its own singular node. Okay, that seems to throw people. So each word gets its own node, and if it already exists, well, then you add your line to it. So there's just a couple of pitfalls there, but they're deliberate and they shouldn't be too hard to figure out. But for the most part, you get to follow the code that I wrote in our videos. So any questions about that? And any questions about anything before we move on to demos, questions, and other stuff? Okay, yes.
The tree binary quizzes are all due tonight.
That seems like an oversight, right?
Yeah.
All right. I think, yes, I remember that, and then I just proceeded to forget to fix it. Great. I'm going to take care of that right now. Other questions? That being said, the quizzes are actually good. Oh, yes. I need to get Happy Feet. Yes. Happy Feet! I mean, I mentioned we have to show our pets off, but I completely forgot to. She doesn't want to come upstairs? Happy Feet! Happy Feet! Let's see. So I'm busy, while I'm doing this, I'm busy trying to remember that. Oh, right, I have to change the quizzes. All right. Yep, I'm going to get her. Come on, Happy Feet. Come on. Come here, girl. Happy Feet. Happy Feet, come here. Come here. Yes. Yay. Okay. Oh, sorry. Did I scare you? Yeah. I think she's doing fine. All right, so the tree opera. All right, so let me go ahead and bump the quiz due date to mid next week. So the quizzes, by the way, the tree definition and tree operation quizzes, I believe these are pretty good examples of what we would of what you'll see on the exam, if I remember correctly. Yes, they are actually very good examples of what you would see on the exam. So, all right, does anyone else want to share their pet before we move to breakout rooms? Happy Feet people are saying hello to you in chat. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and move people into some breakout rooms, and I'll come in and ask people if you need a demo or if you need help. I'll cycle through them. Do people want me to assign it manually, or do you want to be able to choose your own room? How would people prefer that to be done? All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and create the breakout rooms automatically, 5 breakout rooms, and I'll just cycle through them alphabetically. Yes, you can do that. That's fine.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, I will go ahead and stop recording.